Let's talk some more about this pervasive aspect of the moon god, the star god, and this entire Babylonian pantheon and how entrenched they were within Arabia, including the area around Mecca and Medina. Remember, we have Babylon, Mesopotamia, where this particular belief originated. It was adopted by the Yemenis. The Yemenis controlled Arabia, and they traded all the way through Arabia, all the way up into Lower Turkey. This is the area around Haran. These names, as you know, these geographies keep coming up. This is no accident. This entire religion was endemic within that region. Now, of course, Muslims want to deny that Muhammad was a pagan, but it's quite obvious within their own writings from their major scholars. Muhammad's family were pagans, and Muhammad himself was a pagan before he started worshipping Allah. Although Allah existed prior to Muhammad's birth. His father was called Abdallah. His grandfather prayed to Allah. He was, in fact, consecrated to Allah, who was at that time called Hubal, because to them Allah was the God. And this God was Hubal. Hubal is also known as Molech. But let us continue. Now we're talking about the goddess Anunit. Anunit was an Assyrian or Chaldean goddess worshipped by the early monarchs. She is supposed to have resembled the Venus of the Greeks. We've just covered her, and we've seen that she's the same god across multiple different geographies, just under different names. Anunit was also a star which was identified by the Assyrians with the goddess Ishtar, the daughter of the moon god Shin. Then we have in this paper an account given by Nabonidus of his restoration of the temple of the moon god at Haran. So now Nabonidus, whose worship of the moon god Shin is well known, restored a temple of the moon god at Haran. Haran is where Abraham came from. Muslims were looking for the original religion of Abraham before he turned to Yahweh. What would that be? Well, the worship of the moon god, and the temples of the sun god and of Anunit at Sepharvaim. So now we've got this interesting triad here: Ishtar, the sun god, the moon god. Now the god of Sepharvaim was Adrammelech, plus Anamelech. Notice Malek, Moloch. Of course, you have within Islam, you've got Abdul Malik, the slave of the Malik. I hope you can see these little linguistic as well as historical connections that are starting to reveal themselves. Tamar's influence. Shin and Hadramaut. Hadramaut would be Yemen. This is a region within Yemen at the time. Tamar's position may have forced or stimulated the other town states of the oasis of Arabia Deserta to partake to some degree in the civilizations of the surrounding countries in the northeast, northwest, and south, while trying to preserve or re-establish their independence. So what we have is these towns are being influenced, and they all were, by the financial and military and economic might of the countries around them. In this case, the Yemeni kingdom was the most powerful kingdom. It was exerting its cultural influence, and these other countries adopted some of those ideas. So Arabia was definitely heavily influenced by these religious ideas coming from the Hadramaut. Different scripts were used and developed. Even the clansmen of the nomadic tribes knew how to write. Encyclopedia of Islam, Volume 1, page 883. This is really interesting because we're not looking at illiterate clansmen. These people are traders. They're literate. They write. There was a profusion of languages and texts, written words in the region. And then, of course, under Islam, all of this suddenly disappears for a very long time. One can ask, what were they covering up? Why were they destroying the written history? There are also several important archaeological sites on the coast of the Arab-Persian Gulf, and they mention here there are, as in the north of the Hejaz, a large portion of the surviving documents are written in Aramaic. So now we know there were numerous documents written in Aramaic. Aramaic was the mother tongue of part of the population, especially the elites. A large number of Aramaic-speaking churchmen and religious authors in the Nestorian church came from the Gulf, especially in the 7th century. Now, texts in Sabaean script were relatively common. Right, so now you've got religious people, churchmen, Christians, Aramaic, Sabaean. In the Gulf, as in the north of the Hejaz, texts in foreign languages, Akkadian. Well, we know that some of the gods were from Akkadia, and now we've got evidence in the Gulf, just like in the Hejaz, there's Akkadian. So that clearly these documents traveled across, were known and were read in that region. Imperial Aramaic. Nabatean. Anyone say Petra? Greek, Latin are common. In southern Arabia, there are 5 inscriptions that have been found in Ge'ez, which is classical Ethiopic, 2 in Hebrew, 3 in Sabbaic, Nabatean bilinguals. Sabbaic, Yemen, Nabatean, this is Jordan, Petra, so north and south joined in the middle. Really interesting. And Greek, Latin, so these people knew Greek and Latin. 1 inscription in Greek, 1 in Nabatean, and finally 1 in Palmyrenian. Then there's graffiti in Greek, Nabatean, Palmyrenian, and a group of Indian and Ge'ez graffiti in a cave on Socotra. This region was literate. Huge amount of trade, traffic, language, culture that was traveling. Religious ideas spread through the trade routes. So Islam doesn't come from a vacuum. It comes from a region that was thriving in terms of its trade, in terms of its language, and these ideas spread through these networks. In the earlier polytheistic period, the Hadrami pantheon shows a close similarity to other South Arabian areas. Okay, so now the Yemeni pantheon has similarity to what's in Arabia, dominated by the astral triad of the moon, sun, and the Venus star, except that the moon god in Hadramaut bore the distinctive name Shin, borrowed from Babylonian religion. Now you've got Arabian languages, a number of foreign tongues that were in use in this land, Akkadian documents, Greek texts found in Bahrain, and even Latin rock inscriptions in northwest Arabia. It is only the Aramaic language, together with its script, that is attested with any frequency. For some reason, that has survived. Now, of course, you've got Nabatean and Palmyrene influence, and in East Arabia, as proven by a growing corpus of texts and a variety of materials such as coins, bronze plaques, and potsherds, surviving correspondence in the Aramaic dialect known as Syriac between church authorities in Babylonian and East Arabian clergy. So now you've got this heavy confluence of different ideas from different regions concentrated in this area. Islam could not have developed in a vacuum. It developed within a pagan milieu, within a pagan set of circumstances, ideas that were well-known, well-traveled. Interesting that at the time of Islam, they simply erased all of that. Everything was from the Jahiliyyah, should be destroyed. Clearly, I would say an effort to hide the evidence.